Hey, hello, everyone. Well, as you can tell, I am definitely not Ethan. We are two very separate people. So I am stepping in for Ethan today. I think Ethan's been pretty honest with this group. Well, first of all, I just want to say how honored I am to step in and cover for Ethan. Ethan has been a part of this community conversations. I think it started during the pandemic. So I know he's built a relationship with all of you, and it's super important for him to always be here so he wouldn't miss it. So I'm just putting on do not disturb. There we go. I know it's super important for him to be here. And he would only miss it for a really good reason, but he definitely passes on his love and what's up. And I'm going to do my absolute best to go ahead and represent for him as well. So, welcome everyone. So, what I always love to do, I know this is community conversation, so it's a little bit different than the live stream I host with Dr. Liz McInville every Wednesday at 9 my time here on the West Coast or 12 Eastern, where the foundation is located. So, this is just an opportunity for us to kind of talk, chat, answer questions, engage with everyone. So, in order for community conversations to be fun, I need y'all to say what's up, to say hi, to ask questions. So far I've gotten a bunch of hi. So hi Nathan and Jane and Spence and Dave and Tracy. Hi and welcome everyone to the show. If everyone can say hi and where you're from, I always like people. Hey Sam, how you doing, Sam? I will see you hopefully at the conference in July. I always see Sam at the conference. And you are at your office, Dusty, which is nice. That's where I'm at. So I am here. A little bit about myself, in case you don't know who I am. My name is Chris Tronson. I'm a licensed therapist here in Orange County, California. I work at the Gateway Institute, and I've been working in the OCD field since about 2009 is when I got hired in 2010 in different roles, running support groups, etc. But I actually became part. The reason I became a therapist was because of my own OCD journey. I actually was the keynote speaker with my mom at the 2011 IOCDF in-person conference. The IOCDF will always have a special place in my heart because after many years of not having a diagnosis and searching for treatment and getting a lot of bad treatment or getting a lot of people who said I was a hopeless case, the IOCDF we found, and they linked me up with a therapist who absolutely saved my life. So shout out to Karen Pickett, who still treats OCD these years later. So shout out to her up in Los Angeles. But the IOCF was super contributing to me finding help and a community. So super excited about being here and kind of stepping in from Ethan and giving two different perspectives. Obviously, as somebody who had absolutely severe OCD to the point that I became housebound and hospitalized and had to move back in with my family, as well as giving insight as a clinician. So a little bit of both. But yeah, if you could put in the chat a little bit from where you're from and where you're joining us from. I know, Sam, I'm not wearing a trench coat. I'm just wearing a normal like jacket today. It's funny because they're not trench coats. They're just normal coats. But even though being here in California, it still gets cold. So I'll wear a jacket, and some people joke that it looks like a trench coat. Jane, I'm so bad. I don't know where Los Gatos, California is. So you'll have to kind of give me the heads up. Where is Los Gatos? Thank you, Sam, for liking the outfit. I was just saying before I came on, I'm like, oh, I didn't know if the silver would look horrible, but I like it. So a little quick housekeeping. These live streams are intended to be a support system. It's to give you an opportunity to get some resources, to get some clinical direction, to communicate with each other. But we can't step in and be a crisis hotline. If you are in crisis, which we know OCD often does cause crisis at times, please get the support you need. You can dial 988. You can go to 988lifeline.org. You can go to your nearest emergency room, call 911. If you have a clinician that you work with, definitely reach out to them. This is an opportunity for community and for us to have an OCD discussion for a good hour and to offer support to everyone. So I just want to make sure you go to the right place. And we are currently live on a bunch of different platforms. We're on, it's always hard for me to say X, Twitter, X. I know we're on Twitch, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube. So we've got to figure out how to get on Instagram. I know that that's coming soon. Okay, Jane, near Santa Cruz. So now I kind of know where Los Gatos is. So welcome from the Bay Area. We got Miss Nessa from Georgia. And Sam being silly. So I have two conversations I want to have, but once again, this is your all community conversation. So you could jump in with questions or even just thoughts, or not necessarily always questions. We do more like clinical questions on our live stream, and we get a lot of questions. But if you have any just general comments, anything you're going through, anything you want to share, any successes you've had, or any challenges or anything you're trying in your life, I'd love to hear about that. I was talking a little bit to Ethan and Katie this morning because I'm stepping in for them. And I know with Katie and Ethan, they were kind of talking to me about it. And I said, look, like, what do you want me to say? Because I'm stepping in for you, Ethan. And he's like, well, I've already been a little bit honest with the community conversations crew about what's going on. And so he said I could talk a little bit about it. And what I want to say is, like, Ethan, he's been pretty open that he has health related OCD and he's going through something health related. And so that kind of brings up the topic, like, what happens if one of your fears really does occur? That can be absolutely horrifying, right? Like something that we've been worried about a lot. So that might be somebody who has relationship OCD and is really, really concerned about the relationship ending or going through a breakup. It could be somebody with health related OCD who gets really, really fearful about their health and then end up getting sick or end up getting something diagnosed. It could be about somebody who, it has moral scrupulosity and is afraid of like hurting people's feelings. And then they get confronted by a friend group that says, look, you've really disappointed us or let us down. And the thing is, when our worst thing, can happen, like that's really a struggle. It's really difficult to experience. One of the good things, though, I think is like how I think of the treatment is when we have really bad OCD, we start to live like a lifestyle of like, resistance and avoidance. We really want answers. I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but I have OCD. So Googling, right? Like trying to look up stuff at all hours, but then websites give different information and we don't know which one is right. Because of my health OCD, which is very similar to Ethan's, constantly looking up stuff online, trying to get answers, trying to figure things out, right? So we get so desperate for answers. We don't want to deal with any uncertainty or any like doubt that we experience. And we just kind of avoid things and become used to not really engaging in life. And so I think part of the recovery is to kind of get back into things that we care about and to say, look, I want to start figuring, how to get back into life. And so when something happens real, we got to step up and just handle it the same way other people who don't have OCD handle it. So for instance, like I've had health scares, even though I have health OCD. Ethan is going through something health right now. And it's difficult because when the thing that you fear the most comes true or starting to happen, you want to freak out. You want to run. It's like, oh, did I not do my compulsions right? Or did I do something wrong and now I deserve it? But I think people have to remember that we all mess up sometimes, or we all goof, or we all go through hard times, or we do say something that offends somebody, or, we end up accidentally, angering somebody we care about, or breakups do happen. And one of the things that I think OCD does is it makes us not trust ourselves anymore. And I think it makes us start to feel pretty helpless and feel like we can't achieve things that we once had confidence in ourselves. And so when other people go through health related incidences in their life, or if they go through a breakup, or if they've hurt a friend's feelings, it's difficult for everyone. But because they have a central trust in themselves, they feel like, okay, what do I need to do? And who do I need to become to make this okay, right? How can I apologize to a friend or sit down and try to repair? And if it doesn't happen and they end up deciding to not remain friends, I'll have a low moment and I'll be sad, but I'll figure out how to bounce back and land on my feet. Us with OCD don't feel like that's going to happen. We go to worst case in our heads. Nobody will be my friend anymore. Nobody will talk to me. I'll lose all my friends. I'll be isolated for life and I'll just find myself very, very depressed, right? Or with a breakup, with relationship OCD, if we break up and we don't have OCD, people are still sad, but they end up landing on their feet and saying, okay, I'll have some time to sort of grieve the breakup, focus on myself, and then start dating again. But OCD tells us with our OCD, you'll never meet another person. You've ruined your soulmate. You're going to be single forever. You'll never have kids. You'll never have a family. So OCD likes to take things to an extreme, and that makes it feel very difficult to land on our feet, right? But just like Ethan's handling what he's going through, just like people with OCD can handle things when they go bad. I know, like, I've had clients where their fear is like, leaving the sink on and it kind of floods their apartment. And they end up not leaving their sink on, but their apartment does get flooded. And what they always say is, although it's difficult and challenging and really hard, I ended up getting through it. It was bumpy. It felt like I went through some turbulence, but I was able to step into action. The reason OCD is so hard is nothing's happened yet. Something may or may not happen, but nothing's happened yet. And people are trying to fix a situation that hasn't occurred. So I always give this analogy to my clients. I always say, like, OCD is going into an auto body shop and saying, "Can you please fix my bumper?" And the car mechanics are, the car. I'm not a car person, so I don't know why I'm using this analogy, but the auto body shop rather says, "Okay, you know what? That's fine. We will step in and we will fix your bumper. Don't you worry." And so they end up going back, looking at your car, and they come back in and they say, "Hey, I'm a little confused. I don't see anything wrong with your car, no dents, nothing on the bumper. Can you come out and show us where it is?" And that's like telling them, like, "Oh, there's no bump, but inevitably there will be a bump. So can you fix it now?" They're going to look at you and say, "Why don't you come back when there is a bump?" So it's definitely one of those things where, we can't fix things that have not happened yet. And that's what OCD does. And because nothing's occurring, our imagination can go wild. We can make up a bunch of stuff, right? So, like, if I have relationship OCD, I could think of, like, my partner's going to cheat on my best friend, and I'm going to lose both my relationship, and I'm going to lose my best friend, and I'm going to be miserable forever. If it's not happening in the moment, my brain is going to make up a bunch of stuff. So part of the recovery is to get kind of back into the present and say, okay, OCD is telling me a lot of what if stories. It's telling me a lot of horrific things are going to happen. Sometimes OCD is based on real fears and they might happen, but I trust myself to land on my feet and be able to engage in it. Sometimes things are just not going to happen. And then sometimes hard things do happen, like what Ethan's going through or what other people have gone through. And people seem to land on their feet and handle it. Uh, yeah, for you, Jane, so Jane at 709 says, going to a Stanford clinic as an adult, just diagnosed with PANDAS. So if people aren't aware of what PANDAS is, it's where people sometimes through strep, but it can be another viral infection to the brain, and it can cause a sudden onset of OCD. Often when we think of PANS and PANDAS, that occurs much more in childhood, usually early on, 7, 8. And kids can get like a strep throat or other infection, and then like the next day almost wake up with OCD. A lot of times it's Tourette kind of OCD or just pacing or things like that. I know one thing that happens sometimes is handwriting is negatively impacted, but sometimes it goes undiagnosed or unfound. And then when people are noticing that they keep having these swings of OCD every time it kind of acts up, sometimes people as adults will end up getting finally diagnosed for that. So Stanford, I know, is a great place to be. So I know you're probably struggling, Jane, because it's really scary right now to not know exactly what's going on. But the good thing is it sounds like you found a place that is an expert and really knows your situation and is going to give you some answers. If somebody does have a PANS or PANDAS infection, it's a little bit different in the treatment. So the more the type of treatment I do with clients, ERP and ACT and all those different adjunctive treatments is used. But instead of doing like an SSRI, a lot of times there is a antibiotics that people will take to really kind of try to deal with the infection. So Jane, we are absolutely hoping everything goes well. Yeah, Dr. Google. I always tell people that Dr. Google, Dr. OCD is not who you should go to for your health related advice. Anytime you go onto WebMD and you type in like 2 symptoms, it always tells you that you're basically just going to die. So I'm always like, don't go to Google, don't go to WebMD. It's never going to ever say anything good. 710, Nathan, my OCD has made me very hard on myself and others. Absolutely. So let's talk about that, Nathan. I would say that, people with OCD, I would say depression as well, body dysmorphic disorder as well, are definitely hard on themselves. All of my clients are so hard on themselves. So at OCD Southern California, we're one of the affiliates for the International OCD Foundation. We held a 225-person conference this recent Saturday. And we were having discussions like this, and almost everybody admitted to being pretty hard on themselves. And it's crazy because I always say, like, people with OCD are so kind. They probably care a lot more about people than others because we are always in our heads. We're always kind of like analyzing and thinking about things. We're often intelligent. We have great big goals. But people with OCD are the most harsh on themselves. So, why did I do that? I shouldn't have touched that. I messed it up. Guilt if they, had to quit a job because of the OCD. If they give into a compulsion, if they're in treatment, it's like, why did I do that? So there's a lot of like black or white thinking, a lot of being harsh on yourself. And so I do believe that part of treatment is creating an inner dialogue that is supportive, that is like a coach, an inner dialogue that wants to see you do well. I always kind of shout out Kim Quinlan's book. It is a great book around self-compassion for OCD workbook. And if people like that kind of workbook, or she has a lot of podcasts, and regardless of where you get, your kind of supportive voice inside, really talk to your clinician about that. If you're seeing someone and say, you know what, if I was to talk the way I talk to myself to others, I'd lose friendships, I'd lose relationships with my family. I would not be in a good headspace. People would just kind of not really want to be around me if I spoke to other people the way I speak to myself. And that's the thing, is if I wake up each day and I'm like, well, you're not getting better, you don't do enough exposures, you don't kind of catch when OCD is attacking, you're 25 and you're still living at home and you don't work and you're such a loser. Like, if that's the kind of dialogue I'm having inside, how in the world am I going to better myself, right? It's almost like waking up in like a negative doom and gloom space. We often feel a lot of guilt and shame and embarrassment, and then we tell ourselves, like, we're not good, I don't deserve love, I don't deserve happiness. That's conversations I hear all the time with my clients. It's embarrassing what I do when I'm out in public. Who would ever want to date me? Like, things like that. Sometimes your relationship with your family members have been strained because your siblings are tired of you getting all the attention, or your parents are tired of giving you reassurance. And so it just kind of like reinforces that people don't want to be around you. And so it's really easy to get hard on yourself. But what we know through research is, like, when people are really in a low place and hard on themselves, they're way more likely to give into unhelpful behaviors. Because when we feel down and low, we kind of give into, like, just not answering our phone, sleeping the day away, beating ourselves up more. So once again, self-compassion and giving an inner dialogue that's supportive, it's not gaslighting yourself. It's not waking up each day and saying, I'm amazing, everything's great. No, all it simply is saying is it's giving yourself some, like, some accolades and some support for the things that you are doing well, and it just treats yourself like you're human. So what that might look like is, if I'm with a therapist and one of the goals is to go to my prom, my senior prom. Obviously, I'm way past that age, but let's say I'm somebody who's 18 going to get OCD treatment, and my goal is to go to my senior prom. And let's say I end up showing up about 2 hours late. I go to the prom, but I'm finding myself really having difficulty because I'm having harm thoughts. So I kind of go to the bathroom for a little bit and really struggle. And I go to an after party with my friends, but I leave early, right? I can wake up and look at that two different ways. I can wake up the next day and say, wow, I never thought I'd get to the point of going to my senior prom. Super proud of myself for going. Or if you're older, like maybe this is a work trip, right? I'm so proud of myself for going to the work trip. I'm a little bummed. I wanted to get there on time and I wanted to stay the whole time. And I absolutely did more than I ever thought I would. So I'm really proud of myself. I can't wait to tell my friends, my family, my support system, my therapist. And I would love to kind of, rack my therapist's brain and say, what could I have done differently? What interventions could I have used, or how could I have looked at the situation a different way to ensure that maybe next time I will be on time for the work meeting, or on time for graduation, and I will end up staying the whole time versus having to leave early. That is going to create growth. That's going to create support, and you're way more likely to achieve something compared to the other way of thinking. So hopefully that was kind of helpful. Hi, Janine in Texas. It is probably warm in Texas, so I hope you're having a good time. Amanda at 710, we have CJ, who says, what kind of advice do you have for just right OCD? All right, so here's the trick, CJ. For just right OCD, typically, I'm not saying always, but typically there is no real core fear. There's no fear of like, I'm going to become somebody I don't want to be. I'm going to end up hurting someone, getting sick, etc. Sometimes just right can correlate with magical thinking. So it's like if I don't set my drink down perfectly, my mom will get sick. Or if I don't set my phone down right, the next phone call I get is bad. Sometimes we can have that. And there's different types of just right. Sometimes just right is going to be like symmetry and perfectionism. Sometimes just right is going to be balanced just right. So like if I bump this side of the chair, I have to bump that side. But typically just right can be just where I have to sit down until it feels right. I have to flip through Netflix till I find the right show. When I'm listening to the radio, it has to be at the right volume. So there's just like these rules that OCD creates about what is just right, and you have to follow those rules. The problem is if you don't follow the rules, what comes is an onslaught of discomfort, dysregulation. Something feels wrong. You can't focus on anything else. You're sort of just in your head like, come on, just balance out, set it in the right place, set it in the right place. When I ask clients, like, what do you fear is going to happen? I just write as well. Mine was more about balance. So for me, when I would sit down, you would see me doing this over and over because I was just really trying to get it balanced. In fact, I was misdiagnosed with Tourette's from a psychiatrist because when I'd sit in his office, I'd always have to do this. Or a lot of times, if I felt like when I blinked my right eye blinked more than my left, I would have to then balance it out. So I'd be doing this a lot and people would misdiagnose it. But for me, it was just like I needed things to feel balanced and then everything was at peace. Now, I know now that I was at peace for very short periods of time. It just something else would bother me. And especially with just right, if it's anything like mine, CJ, everything makes you feel just wrong. So you're doing it all day long. The thing is, usually the core fear is just I'm going to feel uncomfortable forever. If I don't do it right, I won't pay attention. I won't be able to achieve things. I won't be able to be myself. I won't be able to be calm. And so for me, like what worked is kind of doing just wrong. Now, picking something that ended up making me feel like I could tackle it. I think even before that, having a conversation with my clinician, my therapist, and recognizing like as humans, our bodies are not able to just sit in a state of discomfort permanently. It just doesn't work. In fact, when we're in that dysregulated like mode, we need energy. Energy comes from sleeping and it comes from eating and it comes from vitamin D, right? So we can't be constantly like pumping ourselves with energy to stay in a state of discomfort forever. So often what happens is if we feel just wrong, let's say we get into our car just wrong, let's say we listen to the radio station at the volume just wrong, let's say we have a just wrong thought, it's not a thought we like. What happens is the discomfort comes in, the panic sets in. And what I learned in my treatment is to say, okay, let's kind of see, let's make it a challenge. Let's see how long we could delay it. So before treatment, if something felt just wrong, it wasn't just right, I immediately gave in. So we would start with 1 minute delay, 5 minute delay, 10 minute delay, 15 minute delay, 20 minute delay. And what my therapist would have me do is like do something just wrong. And then we'd have a conversation about something I liked that was fun. And what I would find is like the alarm would go off so I could like fix it after like 5 minutes. And over time, I was like, I don't really need to fix it. Let's go 5 more minutes. Let's go 5 more minutes. And then eventually it just hit this peak where it was like, you know what? I don't feel the urge to do it. And OCD treatment is so much about momentum. So what ended up happening is once I got the momentum of not wanting to give in to the just right feeling, I was like on a roll. So then I would set a drink down wrong and it was like pick it up and set it down right again into I used to like when I would have the cup holder, right? Like I wanted to set it in perfectly and not have it shake. It was like just set it in and move on, right? I got over that and I learned because treatment is all about learning. Think of it as a learning tool. I learned that the just right feeling that I wanted so badly was super temporary. And if I didn't give into it, it faded pretty quick. And now I can sit down and just relax. Like I don't even think about it. I think that is important for you to know is like, it's not that you're going to, if you fight it, you're going to be uncomfortable for the rest of your life. I don't even think about it anymore. I just don't. There's still little things like I like things certain places. Like I like my phone in a certain place in my car, like my keys when I get home. But sometimes just to kind of like shake it up a little bit, I'll put my keys different places or my phone different places. So hopefully that's really, really helpful. Tracy at 7:10, I always have to remember because the Amanda's in East Coast. Tracy says, "I'll never recover at 7:10." Tracy, I want to say thank you for being so honest, first of all. One thing that we as advocates, the lead and national advocates, so myself, Val, Tommy, Katie, Liz, and Ethan always say is like, we don't want to always put out a message that everything's great. So people then feel like, they have to like fake that they're getting better because they feel like everybody else is getting better. And we want to give you hope, right? So there's going to be those moments, Tracy, that you just feel like you're never going to recover. Nothing's going to work. Nothing's going to help. And it's okay to feel like that at times because you never want to not have your organic feelings. And that's why I think now, especially what I didn't have as easy access to. I did go to conferences and would hear success stories. I actually heard Liz McInville was the first person around my age I heard that got better from OCD, and that really motivated me. And actually, one of my appointments after going to that conference, I used to see my therapist at everybody else's lunchtime. So I was always the only person in the waiting room. And I remember one time there was somebody sitting in the waiting room and we were just chit-chatting, and it was actually her last session. And I was like, wait a second, there's such a thing as like a last session, then you kind of move on. That made me really hopeful. So what I'd say, Tracy, is like whether it's Ethan, myself, Liz, Uma, Tommy, Alex, we have had so many people that have recovered from OCD. And when we say recovered, we don't mean perfectly cured. We mean that instead of OCD being 95% of our life with only 5% of actually living, it flip-flops, right? Maybe OCD is like 3% and 97% of your life you live the way you want. We all have success stories, right? Because we found what worked for us. And I think that's what's important is find what works for you. Really linking up with resources, whether it's these live streams, whether it's the OCD Stories podcast or the Your Anxiety Toolkit podcast by Kim Quinlan, whether it's a self-help book that you find really helpful, or a conference you go to, or a support system that's really got you, or maybe it's ACT combined with ERP, or maybe like Liz and I were talking on our last live stream, dialectical behavioral therapy combined with ERP if you need it. Find what really works for you. And really get that team in position. And then I think the biggest thing that's most important is mindset. And I think for me, what shift and what works for me is I was just fed up. I was tired of having OCD. I was tired of living such a small life and such a restricted life. And it's not easy. My treatment took 14 months. And there were still things I had to work on after my treatment. But I finally just got to a point and I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm really, really done. And I don't know what it's going to look like. And I'm going to put all my trust in my therapist, but I got to make a change. It just was not working for my life anymore. So I had to get fed up. So you will recover, Tracy. So many people do. So many people get better. So it's just finding like the right, like, getting everything logistically correct. And then I always think it's like mindset. What headspace do you need to be in to get better? Isostasia, which is a way prettier name than Chris, at 712 says, my OCD's main themes are very similar to Ethan and Chris, all health related. What I think is challenging about health related, what I see in other people is most of the time when people have health related OCD, it's because there really is sometimes health things going on. So like I have 2 autoimmune diseases that I've had since a kid. I lost all my hearing, well, about 80% of my hearing in my right ear, a little bit in my left. I read lips. Like, I've been through health stuff. I've had some heart stuff that runs in my family. So I think that's what's difficult with this subtype is that most of the time, because we're human, we're going to have health stuff. All of us have stuff passed down from our genetics, from our family. And what happens is people end up, getting certain health things, from their family. And so then what OCD says is like, well, because this happen to you, couldn't this happen to you? And the OCD's favorite thing is like, you're going to get this rare thing that they're not going to catch until the last minute. And then you're only going to have like a day to survive. And it's this rare disease nobody has. And one of the things that OCD likes to do is it likes to make those very rare things like common, instead of the norm being like, okay, most of us go to the doctors, find something out, get the right medication and land on our feet. OCD likes to pick those very rare cases we hear in the media, or like our great grandfather had this or something. And it likes to make that common. So even if it's like 2% chance, it likes to blow it up that the 98% sort of fades away. And so I think a big thing is it comes back down to what can you control and what can't you control. So if you do have a health condition, there's going to be certain things your doctors recommend. And if there's not a health condition that you have currently, you can just take the best care of yourself that you can. So doing just the normal things, right? Like making sure you get good sleep, you're around people, maybe mindfulness or meditation is relaxing, get some nature, have some, the Mediterranean diet is great for you. And I'm not just saying that because I'm Greek, but it's a good meal for people. Getting some kind of movement, walking your dog, right? Spending time with loved ones. So some general wellness. And then if you do notice that you end up, having a health scare or something, like what do you need to follow? But constantly with health related OCD, we constantly are like scanning our heartbeat, scanning our throat. Did I feel something? Getting really worked up. What I always tell people is having a lot of anxiety is sometimes the worst thing you could do for your health, because you're so anxious all the time. It disrupts sleep patterns, eating patterns. Often we're burnt out, don't want to be around others or outside. So make sure OCD isn't causing the health problems. If you're not getting a diagnosis, if nothing's happening to you, making sure that you're not creating something in your head, which then in turn will make you very anxious, which comes with its own set of health issues. What's up, Matt Bannister? Yes, I'm not Ethan, so it's good to see you though. I know I feel weird. I'm always with Liz, so I always have someone to talk to. So it's cool talking to y'all, but it's good to see you, Matt. And if you don't know, Matt is one of our grassroots advocates. And a little birdie told me that you'll be hosting a grassroots live stream for us with Katie. So we really appreciate all of our advocates. A lot of times you'll hear national or lead or IOCDF or grassroots. One of the things that we always talk about in our meetings when we have our advocate meetings is it's not really tiers or levels. Everybody is equally important. And we know that this is absolutely a mission to educate the public on OCD. So A, people can get diagnosed early, and then B, people really understand what OCD is. So thank you to all of the people that advocate. And one thing my mom always says, because we do a lot of our advocacy together since she was such an important part of my recovery, is advocacy looks different for everyone, right? Like sometimes people are going to speak on live streams or speak at the conference. Other people are going to open up and share their story to an aunt or an uncle. Sometimes it's like, recommending a podcast to someone. Like everything is advocacy and makes such a big change. So always want to recommend that. All right, so SpongeBob SquarePants, which if you are the real one, by the way, I'm obsessed with you. I love SpongeBob. It totally reminds me of childhood. So shout out to that. My little sister's childhood, actually, but I would always watch it with her. Gross feelings about, some obsessions around sibling play that might be sexual. I'm frightened whether the incident has left him traumatized, but don't have courage to ask him directly. So this is the thing that OCD does often when it comes to any kind of sexual-based obsessions. It always comes to pretty harsh things. It's never just like, oh, did I accidentally flirt with somebody that might have not wanted to be flirt? It's very taboo topics, right? It's things like this. The only reason I'm not saying it is not because I think it's bad to say. I just don't know with live streams if you're allowed to say certain things. But once again, when I'm with clients, I talk about this kind of obsession the same way I talk about hand washing, because to me, it's all the same. None of y'all are coming onto these live streams or coming to sessions because you really have these wants or desires. If anything, you're the opposite of what this is telling you. So a lot of times this is very common. I'll have clients that have obsessions that maybe they did a sexual pass on someone in the past, and that person is traumatized and is going to a trauma therapist because of something they did. The thing is, once again, the difference between having OCD and not is like when you don't have OCD, people wait for stuff to come to them, right? Either that family member comes to them or they tell someone and it comes to them, or, there's something that happens. But when we have OCD, we push it out on other people. It's like, well, I'm having this thought, I'm having this feeling, I could have done this, I could have said that. Therefore, I'm like pushing that on people. And that's the difference. Is like if this person in your family was traumatized, they would say something to someone, right? I know there's cases where people don't say something for years. And so OCD is going to pull off that. But typically they're going to say something to a family member, et cetera. But your brain is coming up with, what if I did this? What if I did this? What if I did this? So what I want you to practice is like, you have to stop being an investigator. When we have mental compulsions, our brain is trying to figure things out, it's trying to get answers, it's Googling things, it's replaying situations, it's wanting to analyze. And a lot of times people think of that as the obsession, but it's really the compulsion. The obsession is what you wrote down. The compulsion is all the figuring out, the replaying, the analyzation. What I'd guarantee for you is that you haven't gotten any answers. You haven't gotten any clarity. You aren't better prepared for the situation than not if you just let it go. So what I tell people to do in this situation is practice figuring it out less. Practice analyzing less. Practice watching the thought occur and letting it fade. Practice indifference, sort of like knowledge of the thought, but not really engaging with it. Start to kind of get annoyed by OCD for bringing it up and be like, there you go again. Now, what people will say is like, how irresponsible is that, Chris? Like this thing might have happened and shouldn't I figure it out? You will never figure it out if you try to do it compulsive. Yes, in math and science and other areas, the more you spend learning and researching and figuring out, the better you get at a topic, not with OCD. The more time you spend trying to analyze it and figure out and get answers, the more confusion, the more fog, and the less sure you are of yourself. And it just puts you in much more of a state of panic, which with sexual taboo thoughts start to bring on guilt and shame and disgust. And then those feelings create even more urgency to figure it out. So what's really hard, but what the treatments ask you to do is saying, you know what, I'm going to take a step back from trying to figure this out. I've given a lot of time and effort in it and haven't any results. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a step back and stop trying to figure out. When OCD brings up this thought, I'm going to say, look, noted. I hear you, but I've taken some time off trying to compulse. I'm not going to figure it out. OCD is going to try to threaten you. Wow, what a horrible person. That family member could be suffering and you don't even care. Well, that's your opinion. I'm just not going to figure it out. What happens is when people stop analyzing and stop mentally compulsing and ruminating, the fog, the panic, the distress starts to fade. I always remind people, you don't want your pilot to be in a state of panic when they fly a plane. You don't want your Uber driver to be in panic when they drive you. And you don't want a surgeon to be operating on you in a state of panic. So if you're going to decide if you're a horrible human being that's done something horrendous to a family member, you do not want to be in a state of panic trying to make that decision. What clients will find is when they let it go and they stop trying to figure it out. I had sexual intrusive thoughts around family members. When I finally said, you know what, Chris, you've been trying to figure it out for 6 months. This isn't working. What if you just didn't figure it out? What if you just said, I'm taking a break. Nobody's going anywhere. I can figure it out down the line, but I'm really going to work on when the thought pops up. I'm going to let the thought be present and not engage, right? What I noticed is the thought would come up, it would irk me a little bit, cause a state of panic. And then I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm not trying to figure it out. Let me just let it fade. Over time, what started to happen is the thought didn't bring on an onslaught of anxiety. And then my brain was very clear. In my situation, I was very clear that I did not have attraction to family members, but I never would have gotten to that place if I continued to allow myself to try to figure it out. So regardless of people's subtype on here, always remember that analyzation, those mental compulsions, trying to figure things out, never is going to work. Thank you, Matt, for the nice comment about looking dapper. Ethan always jokes with me because he's like, anytime you cover for me, you wear definitely different clothes. So I'm a therapist, so I always wear my nice clothes. I always tell my clients, like, my dream would be to like show up in session wearing like comfy clothes, like Crocs or something. But I feel like people have this like mental image of what a therapist is supposed to look like. And it's always like a 90-year-old guy with like a pipe and like a couch. And I'm definitely not 90 yet. So I always feel like I have to dress a little bit nicer to be taken seriously. Nathan, preoccupied with symmetry when you're younger than 10. Yeah, I mean, there's certain common themes that I would say younger kids have with OCD, and symmetry is definitely one. Lana, hi. I love the question marks. Yes, it's definitely me. It's good to see you. It's always good to see our IOCDF fan that supports our live streams. Stepping in for Ethan. He's dealing with some health stuff, which he talked about last live stream, and he's going to get good answers. I'm a very optimist, so everything's going to work out. HG asks at 723, would repeatedly picking at a callus be considered a BFRB? If you're not familiar with BFRB, that stands for behavior body focused repetitive behaviors. And so typically what we see with those considered is trichotillomania, which is hair pulling, and then excoriation, which is a fancy term for skin picking. Sometimes people might consider like nail biting or nail picking a BFRB, anything like that. But I would say the two big ones are skin picking and hair pulling. What I would say if you were my client HD to get a little bit more information is like, is this a common occurrence? Is this sort of a one-time thing? You were, with your little nephew and you're on a playground and you're kind of doing little like pull-ups on a metal bar and you have a callus and you're starting to pick at it. It's the first time ever. Probably not a body focused repetitive behavior there. Is this a very common theme? Anytime you see a bump on a skin, a callus, a little bit of like a skin, you're always picking, you're always pulling at it, etc. Does it happen when you're stressed or where you're bored? Do you sometimes get like a good feeling or at least that feeling of completion? Are you trying to get rid of the callus to get your skin smooth despite causing blood? If that's what's going on, then yes, I would definitely consider it one, which is an OCD related disorder, which we know body dysmorphic disorder, hoarding disorder, and then of course skin picking and hair pulling or trichotillomania and excoriation disorder, RBF, are OCD related disorders. So if you want to put in the chat a little bit more info, I can answer that. But if I didn't answer it, but yeah, I mean, we all might pick at skin and stuff like that. But for clients, when it's a BFRB, it's just a very common occurrence, causing a lot of distress. Often we're like causing ourselves to bleed or pulling out skin, things like that. Okay. So Stasia says at 7:25, doing things halfway or that doesn't feel right has been a good exposure. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's I think of it like this is like in just right or symmetry, etc. Like OCD is demanding a certain way of doing things, a certain very like ritualistic way, a certain like set of rules. And it's just being a rule breaker. And then I think it's also figuring out that these rules never came from a good place at all. We do have some really good rules in place, like please look both ways before crossing a street because we know you're less likely to get hit. Put on your seatbelt when you drive because you're less likely to get flung from the car, right? Making sure that you are, what do you call it? Like not, being more aware of your surroundings when you're walking late at night because it's a little bit safer. So we have rules that work. OCD's rules don't make sense. And a lot of times when I ask clients, like, where did you get this rule? Especially for like just right, there is no real reason. They're just like, well, I remember when I was 7, I started doing this thing. I just remember from a kid, I always wanted to like balance out my blinking. I'd chew on the inside of my mouth and I wanted it to be balanced. If I picked out a finger, I had to pick at the other. So sometimes there's no reason for it, but we've just kind of created these rules and then we just feel that urge to do it. I think sometimes acceptance and commitment therapy can be an adjunct of support. So accepting that feeling of just right is going to come on, but committing to really engaging in things outside of the just right behaviors. Nathan, yes, at 7:26, I'm slowly learning that not everything has to be absolutely perfect all the time. I would argue that almost every subtype has a little bit of perfectionism in it. So what I mean by that is obviously there's perfectionism, which we know is around like getting perfect grades, reading everything perfectly, etc. But I would say like for scrupulosity, a lot of times it's being like having the perfect thoughts, never having a blasphemous thought, being the best Christian or the best Jew or the best or Jewish person or the best Muslim that you can be, right? I think with contamination, I want it to be perfectly clean. I want my shower to be perfect. I want every part of my body to be covered in soap. When it comes to like social anxiety, I want to be perfect. I don't want to do anything embarrassing or anything that's like laughable. So I would argue that perfectionism is almost an all. So part of the recovery is saying like, good enough. Let myself be human, letting things go. A lot of people saying what's up to each other. Val, one of our good lead advocates, says stay encouraged. It's always good to hear from Val. Also, not this Thursday, but next Thursday. I hate dates. So that's 15, 16, 17, 18th. Thursday, April 18th is the Faith and OCD conference. So Val Andrews and her husband Mel is on a panel with myself and my mom, really talking about how family members and loved ones can support people in their life. So my mom and I kind of talk more on like general support. and then Val, as well as a bunch of good panelists. Annie was one of them, and Kim Vicente, as well as the ones I mentioned, are talking to family members and loved ones about how to support. So yeah, Paige at 727. I've realized it's often easier to do the compulsion than deal with it doing ERP. So here's what I want you to think about. When I'm working with people, I always try to get people to see that the things that you need to get better with OCD, you already those are concepts you already know. And I'd say there's a lot of things in our life that's easier to just give into, right? So I don't know if you're a parent, but I'm not a parent, but when I moved back into my home to get OCD treatment, because I was hospitalized, I needed to be taken care of. I ended up becoming really close with my youngest sister and almost became like a parent figure. And yeah, it was easier to just buy her the thing at the grocery store so she didn't throw a fit. It was easier to say, yes, you can go do that, even if I knew it wasn't the best thing for her to do, because she wouldn't scream and yell and complain. But the problem is then the screaming and the yelling and the complaining becomes louder, or it's always easier to swing by Carl's Jr. and get a burger instead of like driving to your family's Thanksgiving, right? But who wants to have a Carl's Jr. over your family's Thanksgiving? It's definitely easier to scratch a bug bite, even though we know it's going to make the bug bite worse, than just kind of dealing with it. So in our life, there's a lot of times that the easier thing is quicker and it feels good. But we know that over time, that doesn't really serve us, right? It doesn't really create the change we want. So if we want our child to not throw things and throw tantrums and really learn that, hey, sometimes you're not going to get the things that you want or get your way, it's difficult. It's hard to be a parent. I give much props to a parent. Although I help with my little sister, it's nothing like being an actual parent. So it's being able to put that down. Getting a divorce versus working out the complexities of a marriage. Although I'm an OCD specialist, when I had to do my hours in grad school, I worked with couples, and it would have been easier for all those couples to just break up, but they had a bond, they had a marriage they wanted to work out. So you'll see across your lifespan that giving into the easier thing is always easier, but it just reinforces things that we don't want. It reinforces maladaptive, unhelpful behaviors. And so in our lives, anytime we put our foot down and say, you know what, I want to quit smoking. It's easier to just smoke, but I don't want to smoke, so I'm going to figure out how I'm going to quit. I'm going to create a plan and get in the mindset of quitting and put in the hard work. For me, it was like, I'm tired of saying yes to my little sister and contributing to this behavior. So I started saying, no, you didn't do your homework, so we're not going to go to Soup Plantation. You can roll around the floor and throw a fit, or you can sit down, do your homework, and then we could be eating in an hour. It's like putting down we're going to go to couples counseling. This marriage isn't working out. So it is way easier than pushing back against the difficult thing. And the outcome is so much better when you start reopening your life and gaining all of the freedoms that you used to have before OCD really took over. Paige, you'll get it. With all that said, I want to validate what you're feeling. I have OCD. I get it. Do you know how many times it was way easier to give in? So this is no judgment, because I'd be a hypocrite because I gave in all the time too. What I think started to happen for me, though, is I started to build that momentum of pushing back against it. And then I got the momentum of fighting the OCD, which of course in turn ended up putting me in a way better position. And it's why I can do what I do now. So hang in there, Paige. A lot of people can definitely relate to that. A lot of really nice things that people are saying to each other. And that's what I always think is so helpful. All right, Julie says, my son wants to do ERP, but is worried he will be okay for a while, then relapse down the track, and then all his safe or clean places will be contaminated. Is this a common thought? So Julie, that's at 7:31 for you. Thanks, Amanda. I would say that what's really difficult, Julie, is that it does take a little bit of trust, right? I mean, I had contamination as well. And one of the things that my therapist did for one of my final sessions was she came to my house, and I hadn't had people in my car. I hadn't had people in my room. I hadn't had people touch my stuff in like years, probably 6 years at that point. So when she came in and touched the bedding, touched my towels, touched my shampoo, touched my items, right? And I couldn't ask her to wash her hands or ask her where her hands had been. It was super difficult, but let me tell you how freeing it was, because then the the consistency with that was, my family was able to start to go through my space. Because where I was, it's not very interesting, but where I was living, like people had to kind of walk through my space to get to the computer or to get to the balcony and stuff. And so I'd kind of like blocked off parts of the house for people. And so as they got to do it, it sort of felt like the cat's out of the bag, right? Like it's done. And I was at peace. I just realized how much nicer it is to no longer freak out about, the cable guy's coming over and he has to walk through my space. I have to hide everything and clean when he goes. It was just like, you know what? It's so nice to just be done with it. So I would say for me, like really pushing my OCD all the way to the end, I got to a place where I just was done. And so it didn't come back. My clean spaces weren't ruined and I couldn't handle it. If anything, I started to realize that's the thing is there should definitely be a learning component to the treatment. And I learned that my places were never really clean or safe in the first place. All that was made up by OCD. No scientist came in my home and said, wow, Chris, your room is safer. You're going to live an extra 50 years and never get a disease. It was all made up. And that's what you learn when you're really kind of engaging in treatment. You just start to learn that OCD makes stuff up. So when I finally got to a point where I kind of broke through it through the exposure I mentioned, I got clarity and it was just like, you know what? This is all made up. I don't have to do any of this. My brain made this up, so I'm going to unmake it up, right? The rest of the house is fine. Nobody in my house has gotten horrible diseases for their space. Sure, I felt a little uncomfortable that people are in my room and having to walk through it. But you know what? A little bit of uncomfort is definitely worth all the freedom it brought on. So also, Julie, I'd say lastly, remember therapy is supposed to be collaborative. It's supposed to be systematic. It's supposed to be done in a way that your son understands what he's doing, sees value in it, and leads in it. So that helps as well. It's like he won't feel like he's having to be forced to do something. He's doing something that he sees value in as well. Spence says, Chris at 732, Chris, you were once described a skin sensation from having skin lotion applied. Was this paresthesia or formication or part of panic attack? Was it more than just a burning sensation? Yeah, so a dermatologist once told me, because my hands were so bloody from overwashing, she told me like, hey, make sure that you look at the expiration date of lotion because I had a client once that got an infection and lost a part of their finger. So then my OCD made me absolutely afraid of hand lotion. I wouldn't use lotion. I wouldn't shake hands with people because they might have lotion on their hands. I didn't know when it was expired. If I used hand soap and it said like lotion soap, I wouldn't use it. I would go to different like grocery stores to wash my hands. And if there was a sticker that said like lotion hand soap, I wouldn't use it. I would say it's definitely none of the things you mentioned in the sensation of like, I get what you're saying. Like some people have health conditions where they actually feel like a burning sensation or like a tingling sensation. Like if you sit on your leg for too long and then you stand up and your leg feels like that. It was more so like there was such a focus on my hands. So when I did that exposure of putting lotion on my hands, there was such an intense sensation. I couldn't focus anywhere else. It's like all I could focus was on my hand. And that just was all where my mental energy went. And that's where it was almost like a tingling sensation. So I tell clients sometimes, like if you put up your finger and you really focus on the tip of your finger and all you do is stare at your finger, think of your finger, talk about your finger, it's almost like you can almost feel like the beat, like a heartbeat or something, like a pulse. It's like there's just a sensation on there and it does become like a sensation. So I would say for a lot of people with contamination, they'll literally say it feels like their hands are on fire. It feels like their hands are like like a tingling sensation. That's because we put so much attention on it. It's similar to people that have sexual intrusive thoughts. They put such a focus on their groinal area that they start to have tingling down there or sensation, then misread that as it must mean something. So that's how it was for me. Um, Let's see. Hooligan Mama at 734 has some nice words for me. Thank you. I always am so honored when people say kind things about me. And what I would say is I always love hearing stories. Your 18-year-old is inspired by me. I cannot wait for the day that your 18-year-old is doing amazing in their treatment. And then they end up being an inspiration for other people. I always think it's so cool to see people that have said like myself or Ethan or others have inspired them. And then I see them presenting. There was a panel last year at the conference last year, some people that reached out, and I couldn't be on the panel because of scheduling, but they had all been inspired by myself and others. And then they did a talk, and then people were coming up to them and saying how they were inspiring people. So it's such a cool thing to see so many people support each other. So I always think that's awesome. Yeah, Isastasia says at 7:35 that the pandemic was a trigger. I'd say that's a very, very, very common. A lot of people say that their OCD got worse during the pandemic. It kind of like launched a lot of very intrusive experiences. So you're not alone. I think it's that isolation. It's the rise in anxiety. Uma, a good IOCDF advocate at 7:39 says hi. Well, you're a beacon of sunshine. You do so much great work, and we are all better off for having you. So thanks, Uma, for being here. Absolutely, absolutely good to see you. Let's see. Adrian at 7:41 says, do you have much wisdom to share around neurodivergent presentations of OCD? Autistic people tend not to benefit from CBT, so it's very difficult to find support in the UK. So yes, so my nephew has OCD and autism, and you're right, there's certain changes that need to be done in the treatment. It's not a do it just like you do for other people. Sometimes people with autism really struggle with like nuances, and things need to be very direct. What I found really, really helps, and this is just what I've found help clinically. I work with a lot of people with autism as well as working with my nephew to stop his compulsive behaviors, is first and foremost, obviously, we need to identify the difference between autistic behaviors, because those don't, create the same, there's not the same meaning behind it. So my nephew loves to roll his trucks and watch the tires spin. That's not a compulsion. However, there's also things where if a bug touches him, he wants a shower and he feels gross and he's like, ooh, bugs, right? Very different, brings a lot of distress. And so what I find works is really having a conversation, a little bit more of a logical conversation with the individual of like, okay, what is your brain saying about the bug? So my nephew will say they're dirty, they're gross, and we'll talk about, yeah, but you touch a lot of dirty and gross stuff. He loves to like grab at dirt and like play in the sand and stuff. And so it's having a conversation with him about identifying that he likes other dirty things. These just cause him anxiety, and talk to him about his reaction to things. So sometimes I find that it does need to be tweaked a little. Sometimes the whole cognitive thing doesn't work, and it's more of the behavioral component that's found very, very helpful. So I would say what you want to do, Adrian, is see if there is somebody that has an expertise with working with autism. Because like I said, I work with autism, other people work with clients with autism. And I would say, as you know, autism is not one size fits all. Everybody with autism is different, just like everybody with OCD. So if CBT isn't working, is values work a little bit more helpful? Is emotion regulation a little bit more helpful for you? Is really kind of finding out where the original fears came from really more helpful? Is more so some safety behaviors around the treatment helpful? So I would say really kind of identifying somebody that's very, very helpful. Yes, Sam, correct. Lip biting, nail biting, nose picking, things like that. Definitely. There's a lot of BFRBs. I would say we always kind of talk about the skin picking and hair pulling. So definitely important to look at different ones. And it's very common in an OCD presentation. Ella says, I'm a college student with OCD, wanting to change your major to psych. I'm worried that this will be the wrong one. I definitely want to say, please, please, please don't think that, Ella. I think there's a lot of times we have perfectionism for ourselves, and we always think that, oh, we have to be in this like perfect headspace. I'll never forget, like in my first class, we have to raise our hand of like what brought us into the psych field. And the teacher asked, like, raise your hand if you've been impacted by a mental health condition. And it was like 80%. And then the second question was, then raise your hand if somebody you love has been impacted by a mental health condition. I think it was like 95% at that point. And then the other 5% were like, yeah, it's because I read something online or was impacted by a person I knew in a class. So I would say for you, Ella, like so many people with that become clinicians have their own mental health journey. You don't have to be perfect. And so as you go through school and things like that, you'll learn more about yourself and continue to get your own help. But clients like to know that we're human. So I definitely think, it's important. Thank you so much, Spence, about the compliment about the DBT and BPD and OCD talk that we did. If you missed it, go to youtube.com/IOCDF. There was a ask the experts rather about DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, and its help for OCD. Okay, I don't know how an hour went by. That went by so quick. I hope that I answered as many questions as I could. It looks like I did because I'm recognizing them. There's a couple I didn't get to, but I definitely don't want to hold you all too long. So it was definitely great to see everybody. I feel a little bit like out of my element because I'm usually with a co-host, so I always have someone to kind of like banter with. But it was absolutely better to banter with all you. Don't tell Liz that. Oh, Michael, quick question. I know we're over, but you struggle with OCD with friendships. I just did a talk at our in-person conference about OCD and relationships and friendships. I'm going to take that to Amanda and we'll put it down. We were kind of brainstorming some topic ideas for end of May, early June, and I think that's a good one. I actually found so many people that felt helpful to talk about just OCD and dating, OCD and like relationships, OCD and repairing relationships, sibling relationships, etc. So we will come up with a day for that because I want to do it. And Michael, you will get the credit. But thank you, everyone. You were great to hang out with for an hour. I hope you felt community and community and just like camaraderie in the chat. You guys were so good at really supporting each other and answering each other and really giving each other support. And that's what's so important. Thank you for hanging in with me. I'm usually talking to like one or two people, so it was weird kind of talking alone, but honestly, it was great. I always love all of you guys. I wish we could all hang out together and kind of just talk OCD and recovery together. But thank you so much for hanging out with me. There's a bunch of great stuff on the IOCDF website, so head over to iocdf.org. You can learn about the live streams that are coming up if you just add a /live to that. We have a couple conferences. Like I said, we have the Faith and OCD conference coming up. We have it opened up for registration for the July conference in Orlando. That's the end of July, so make sure you sign up for that. I'll be back with Liz next Wednesday, so not tomorrow. That's a research roundtable with John Abramowitz and Kyle King. But next Wednesday after that, Dr. Liz McInville and myself will be an Ask the Expert where we answer all your OCD clinical questions. And then I'm pretty sure, I don't know what's next Tuesday, but Ethan will be back soon. Make sure you tell everybody that you missed him and that you like him better. I'll let you all have that. Ethan needs the love. But thank you so much for hanging out with me. And the only final words I have is continue to get education, continue to get resources, community. And like myself, I'm living proof you can get better. I always tell people I didn't have anything special. I just really got into the mindset of wanting to be recovered. So I hope all of you get in that mindset. It can be a struggle. It can be in a bumpy journey, but it's worth it. And when you get to that really good mindset place, you'll look back and then hopefully you will all support and help others. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. And yeah, somebody said Greece is nice. I'm half Greek, so I say that's good. Take care, everyone. iocdf.org. And we'll see you back at a live stream soon. Take care, everyone.